Hi, you are on the channel Optimystery. Today we will tell you about another terrible and not human experiment. The world knows many examples of cruel and unethical scientific experiments. For new knowledge, mankind has not once had to pay a high price. However, what Julian experienced cannot be compared with any sophisticated test of the past, all because she became a guinea pig for her father, who dreamed of making her a superhuman. Today you will learn this incredible story, which the Frenchwoman herself decided to tell the world only after 40 years. You will learn how she was able to survive in the conditions of a domestic concentration camp. The beginning of this heartbreaking story was laid back in 1936, when a 34-year-old businessman from France named Louis de Dieu made perhaps the most unusual deal of his life. The fact that he bought his youngest daughter from a couple of poor miners sounds wild. But that's the reality. The man promised the family that their girl will never need anything, and he also promised to give her a good education. The only condition that he put forward: the mother and father will never see their child again. Agree not a simple proposal. The parents have long thought, weighed the pros and cons, and still came to the conclusion that will give the girl in the hands of a businessman. Of course, most of you will now condemn their choice. The family wanted to give the little girl what they themselves would not have been able to because of the precarious financial situation in which they found themselves. The family was starving, and Louis de Dieu could help them to get back on their feet a little, as he owned a considerable fortune. By the way, the girl's name was Janine, and it was under such sad circumstances that she found herself in the care of a rich stranger. Why did the man have to buy a child for himself? I answer. So he was going to bring up a superhuman. The only thing in his plan did not take into account the businessman is that the girl at that time has already turned 6 years old, and she was not even just by age, is not quite suitable for the realization of such a strange-seeming idea. Then de Dieu made a serious decision to fundamentally change his own strategy. No, of course, he did not refuse his words and allowed the ward to study and graduate from the institute. Moreover, for all these years spent with her, he did not just care about the girl. Louis knew perfectly well what he was doing. He was raising a wife, and quiet and docile. Sounds wild and scary. Everything worked out as he planned when Janine was 28 years old. She gave birth to a beautiful blonde girl. This is where it all begins. It is the little Maud, and became the main project of her father. To bring her up as he wanted to, man even bought an estate in the north of France, where he soon moved his entire family. It was completely quiet and secluded place. It was chosen for a reason, as you have probably already guessed, and yourself. First of all, so Louis wanted to protect little Maud from the influence of the outside world. The businessman himself sincerely considered it destructive. The second reason was that de Dieu was going to really harden her character, and unnecessary witnesses of this, he was simply not needed. The first years the girl was still allowed to play in the garden only after finishing classes with her mother. But when Maud was 5 years old, her life changed radically. She was completely deprived of free time. A child for experiments should be said at once. De Dieu had on his daughter just grandiose plans. He wanted to educate a woman who could bring all of humanity to a new stage of development. He believed that such a person needed to acquire the skills to overcome all sorts of difficulties and obstacles in life, as well as to overcome any dangers. In accordance with his plan, de Dieu and developed his own system of child rearing. His own home turned into a real testing ground. This is how Janine was busy teaching her daughter, while Louis regularly trained her stamina and emotional stability. Just imagine how the child lived in a family in which the mother and father took any manifestation of feelings as a dangerous weakness, which must be urgently eradicated as laziness or fear. From childhood, the little girl was deprived of almost all amenities. She lived, for example, in a room without heating, and her bed was always hard because it never had a mattress. In addition, Maud bathed only once a week and in cold, dirty water, which was left after her parents. Agree now. In the modern world, it is just amazing. But for the poor girl, all was a real reality, and all because of the fact that in the head of de Dieu was spinning only one obsessive thought. Comfort greatly hinders the development of superhuman abilities. You think it's all restrictions for little Maud, as if not so. The girl was not allowed to play with toys at all, not to mention the interaction with other children. Fed the little girl exclusively without tasty food that had low nutritional value. It turns out that Lewis believed that the child's body must learn to cope with vitamin deficiency, but the restrictions were imposed not only on food but even on toilet paper. Fashion was allowed to use only one piece at a time, say, too cruel. And how do you then, when the girl was 7 years old, crazy father invented a new test for her. From then on, every meal was accompanied by brandy or whiskey. You may have guessed it yourself later. It had a very devastating effect on the child's liver. Maud would later recall her father always told me that it was necessary to learn to master such an important tool as the ability to cope with intoxication in order to learn any secrets of the enemy. It gets worse from there. Imagine a barefoot girl locked in a cold, damp, and dark cellar from time to time. Her mother, completely subject to her husband's authority, even sewed bells to her daughter's clothes to keep her from moving. The woman believed it was the sound that attracted the rats for the same reason Maud was not allowed to cry. The child was able to learn to suppress her own emotions, for this parents forced the girl to hold an electric fence in her hands for 10 minutes. When Maud was free from such training, her mother was engaged with her in music lessons and sports. The girl was trained in fencing, horseback riding, gymnastics, and swimming. Also, de Dieu was insistent that the daughter must own a large number of musical instruments. He explained his desire to the following phrase: in the concentration camps can survive only musicians. So Maud had no other choice but to learn the piano, violin, saxophone, trumpet, accordion, and double bass. According to Maud herself, she managed to keep her humanity and kindness solely thanks to music, books, and a few animals that were in her house. When the girl began to grow up, she began to trick a little with her parents. Of course, the control over her was constant, but she still managed to sneak a taste of sweets and tear off the second piece of toilet paper. The girl could also occasionally wander through the night garden. When she managed to stealthily climb over the window, she said, "A person can endure any of the most difficult tests and still find a way out." It can be said that Maud's life changed radically only when their house appeared in the music teacher, whom she called Monsieur Malin. He began to notice on the girl's body bruises and abrasions, and soon realized what was going on in the walls of the estate. Somehow, miraculously, he was able to persuade Louis and his wife to give him a few lessons. Malin had insisted that they had more professional tools and would learn much faster. It was quite unexpected, but the couple gave the go-ahead. Apparently, they believed that their daughter had been sufficiently trained and will never go against their will. A little later, the music teacher even arranged for Maud to work in his music shop. By the way, it was there that she met her first love. But de Dieu had completely different plans, because by that time he had already found a suitable party for Maud, 50-year-old man, non-traditional orientation. But the situation again intervened in the music teacher, who advised to give the girl to marry a guy, Richard, with whom she already had a romantic relationship. Of course, the father was not happy about this coincidence, but still gave his permission for the marriage. His only condition was that Maud returned home at his first call, and the girl had to promise that she would take care of him until his death. But then everything went wrong after 18 years of house arrest. Maud Julian no longer wanted to return to her parents. Not only in freedom, she had to relearn how to communicate with people and restore her health. She also sought the help of a psychotherapist, who for several years helped her get rid of the devastating feelings of guilt and regular panic attacks. For a long time, no one knew about what she had to go through, not even her husband, To tell him his story, Maud could only in 1981 when her father passed away. To start a new life, she had to undergo a full course of rehabilitation after all that happened. She studied at the institute, became pregnant, and gave birth to 2 girls, and herself mastered the specialty of psychotherapist, and by the way was quite successful in this field of activity. As Julian tells herself, she was very difficult to decide to become a mother. Fortunately, her story ended well. Today, the woman lives with her family in Paris and works with people who have also experienced various psychological shocks, helping them to get out of this state. In addition, the woman a couple of years ago wrote and published an autobiographical book called Daughter's Story. This is all. Do not forget to rate the video well and, of course, subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your attention and see you soon.